Computers, their operation, hey, that whole matrix of making them work is very complex, and in today's world, many of us are highly dependent upon IT individuals who make the whole system run. But what happens if one of those guys or gals prevents access to the system or disrupts it in some way? Well, it takes us to this week's case. It involves a real man. Terry Childs was his name, lived in San Francisco, worked for the city of San Francisco. He was one of the people in their IT department, and he was a guy who was responsible for configuring a brand new fiber optic based data transfer system. Well, city said we've got some hard times here, and the rumors are being spread that, gee whiz, we may have some layoffs, and some people in the IT department may be laid off. Well, Terry mentioned to his coworkers that, you know what, these guys cannot screw with me because I have the keys to the kingdom. Well, as it turned out, what Terry had was the single password that allowed access to the new system. When came time for the city to lay him off, he said, you know what, I've got the password and you can't lay me off because, gee whiz, you need me, I'm indispensable to your operation. City said, no, you're not indispensable to the operation, you are laid off and we need the password. Well, Terry didn't give him the password, didn't give the city the password for 12 days. And he had encoded the system in such a way that if anybody else attempted to access it, all the data would be erased. So the city was without access to this data for 12 days. Well, eventually Terry gave him the password, but needless to say, the city wasn't happy. Contacted district attorney's office. District attorney office looked at a statute, a law that exists in California that says anybody who disrupts a computer system or prevents access by someone who has lawful right to access it is responsible for violating this statute. It's a crime. Well, Terry was charged with that. Terry was charged with that. But what he said in opposition to it was, you know what? This statute was designed for hackers, where it's designed for bad guys, where it's designed for people who wanted to come into a system, deliberately damage it, or prevent access to it. I was employed by the city. I had every right to do what I was doing, and the way in which I encrypted this with a single password that only I knew was designed to provide maximum security. On the other side, DA offers, hey, wait a second, buddy. This is a simple law. It provides that anyone who prevents access to a system or disrupts it is criminally liable for damage and can be thrown in jail. Case went forward, jury heard this, and the jury convicted Terry. Judge imposed a sentence of 4 years in prison, and said he had to pay restitution, basically a fine of $1.5 million. Needless to say, Terry wasn't excited about this. He appealed the case up to the First District Court of Appeals in the state of California, and there the court looked at it and said, well, you know what? We've listened to both arguments. We've listened to your argument, Terry, that you say it was designed for the hackers and others who intended volitionally to cause harm. And we hear the argument from the DA that says it's a simple statute that anyone who denies access to someone who has a right to a system or disrupts a system shall be criminally liable. Well, in this instance, when we, the Third District Court of Appeal, analyze the statute, we find that it applies to, in fact, anyone. And that means it applies to you, Terry, and that means that you are criminally liable, and that means that the sentence of 4 years and the $1.5 million in restitution stands. And as a result, you are responsible for serving your sentence and paying that restitution. Okay, so what do we learn from this case? Well, we learn that in the state of California, and this will be increasingly seen in the country, there is a statute that if you prevent access to a system, computer system, or disrupt it, you can be criminally liable. And in this instance, we saw it was a guy who was employed by the city that he prevented having access to the system. you know, some people will sit here and they'll say, gee whiz, in their idle time, I'm here, I'm in a position where I can really set up this system such that nobody else is going to be able to access it, or if somebody else does something to it, it's going to have major damage, and I'm the only guy that can do it. And some guys involved in IT work may fantasize about that and essentially holding their employers hostage. But as we can see, in the state of California, and it will increasingly be seen in the rest of the country, there are statutes which impose big time fines and, in this instance, a $1.5 million restitution as a result of those kind of activities. Oh, best held as fantasies, not actual conduct. Hey, we bring you this case as we bring cases every week so you understand how the law works. I'm David Allen.